Hello guys, how are you doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel, and today is Q&A day. And as I always tell you, some of my favorite kind of videos to make. I love answering your questions. I love giving you shout outs and interacting with you guys. And today I did put the usual call out on Twitter for questions for a Q&A, but I also used YouTube's community tab to ask the same question, which I never really do. So I used both places and I got a lot of responses very quickly. It's a little overwhelming, at least for what I'm used to. So what I think I've decided to do is to split this up, and I'm actually going to do this Q&A in two different parts. So today I'm going to answer some of the Twitter questions that I got, and then on the next part, I'm going to answer some of the YouTube questions that I got, because man, there's a ton. Now, we have a lot of questions to go over, so I'm not really going to waste too much more time. I'll remind you guys, if you want to be a part of these Q&As in the future, not only could you be subscribed on YouTube, hello, you should definitely do that, but of course you can follow me on Twitter, where I'm super active, and I put these Q&A callouts to you guys every once in a while. So many questions to get through. I'm a little bit worried about the battery on my camera running out, so I'm just going to jump into it. And let's start with the first Twitter question. So the first few actually come from people who I know on YouTube and on Twitter, so I kind of reserved this space for them. First one comes from my good buddy RetroDeath, at RetroDeath. What is up, man? Thanks so much for asking a question, buddy. Good to hear from you. And he asks me, what is a game you wish you never played? I'm leaving the details ambiguous, he says. I like how he left it really, really open. You know, I didn't have to think too long for me to be able to answer this question, and it's a hard one for me to answer because I love the franchise this game is in, but I hate this game. There are very few video games that I hate, and I really hate this game, and it's Uncharted 3. And I mean it when I say, you guys, that I love the Uncharted franchise. I think Naughty Dog is a great game developer. I know there's controversies, and I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about their final products. The video games that they make are amazing. I love the Uncharted franchise. Last of Us is one of my all-time favorite games, the first game. Uncharted 3, oh my god, you guys, I hate that game. I don't even know how to describe how much I hate that game, except for to say I gave it a good try. 3 different times over the course of many years, I bought that game and told myself, there's no way it's as bad as I thought it was. I have to try it again. I mean, I'm somebody who thinks Uncharted 2 is one of the greatest video games ever made. I liked the first one. I loved the second. I was so excited for the third. I thought there was no way they could screw it up. And most people love the game, so I'm kind of alone here. But I don't know, there's something about the flow, the gameplay, the combat, the overuse of animations on Drake, the character, the weird things that they do with the story. I don't know, the game. It's also got this weird difficulty that I just can't deal with. Not because I can't play hard games, because I play plenty of difficult games, but this game to me, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was like a Twilight Zone effect. Maybe I'm cursed to never be able to enjoy this game, but I can't enjoy the way that game is difficult. It's really hard to explain, you guys. I am not a hater. I am not against the Uncharted franchise because I love the first, second, and fourth game like to death. They're all basically 10 out of 10 to me, but Uncharted 3 is like a 0.5 out of 10. I hate that game. And again, I purchased it 3 different times because I was like, let me go back to it. It's been a couple years. Let me go back and retry it. And every single time, I have been able to make it farther and farther in the game, but each time I end up throwing my hands up and I'm just like, I'm having a miserable time. I hate this game. And so that's a game 3 times over I wish I never played. Next question comes from another good buddy of mine asking the opposite question. This comes from my friend Robert, whose channel is Gaming With Me on Twitter. He goes by Trebor, at Trebor203. He asks me literally the opposite question of RetroDeath, and he says, a video game you most wanted to play but still never ended up playing. And with this one, I'm going to cheat a little bit and actually go with a franchise and not a game, not an individual title. And that would be the Metal Gear Solid franchise, with the caveat that I have played Metal Gear Solid 1 on the PS1 and Twin Snakes on the GameCube, and a little bit of Metal Gear Solid 2. Outside of that, I never really finished Metal Gear Solid 2, and I never touched 3, 4, or 5. And honestly, I feel like I would like those games. I loved Metal Gear Solid on the PlayStation 1 because it was so revolutionary. it looked and felt so realistic at that time, you guys. I would have been 18, I think, when that game came out on the PlayStation 1, and we were playing games like Ocarina of Time and Super Smash Brothers on the 64, but then also here comes Metal Gear Solid that was like so badass and cool and like mature, because, you know, mature games were fewer and farther between at that time. Like, they were around, but it was still like a new thing to see gaming do like more mature kind of content and games that kind of skewed older than what like Nintendo games did at the time. Even though me and my buddies still loved playing on our Nintendo 64, PlayStation was doing some different, cooler stuff, and Metal Gear Solid was like the perfect game for that. I loved the Twin Snakes remake, remaster, whatever that is. I love that to death. And I wanted to play all the other ones, like Sons of Liberty. You know, I dabbled on it on my friend's PS2 when it came out, and it was really cool. I was like, this is so cool. Like, wow, gaming is like so next level. But I never really got to sink my teeth into it, and then I just kind of never went back to the franchise. And there's only reason to think I would like them. I mean, I know Kojima makes long, bloated, story-heavy games, but I also played Death Stranding, and I loved Death Stranding. So, I don't know. Metal Gear Solid, it's a famous franchise. It's legendary. People love it, and I know why. So, I really wish that I kind of stayed dedicated to that series. Next question comes from Kazoo at the Yellow Kazoo, who is actually the Yellow Kazoo on YouTube. So, she asks me a very straightforward and simple question. Do you have any pets? And as a matter of fact, yes, my fiance and I have several pets, and we will eventually be getting another one too. Right now, we have a cat named Marley, who is an all-black cat, and he is really nice, really sweet, and a total scaredy cat. But he is very, very kind and very gentle. He's an amazing pet. We also have 3 pet rats. We have Ruby, and we have Ash, named after Ash from the Evil Dead, and we, of course, have Olive. And these pets have changed our life big time. We actually had 4 pet rats last year, Ruby being one of them, and unfortunately 3 of the 4 that we had did pass last year. Rats are incredible pets, you guys, but they do not live very long. So just a warning, if anyone gets into it, you will get so attached to them and they don't live long, and it is heartbreaking. So we now have the 3. We replaced two of the 3 that we lost with Ash and Olive. We also have a pet lizard named Kyoshi, and we have a pet fish named Krillin. And moving on to more of your guys' questions on Twitter, we have one from Ocean Blue at CEO of Vor, who says, "Hey Rob, huge fan. What is, in your opinion, the worst 2D Metroid game?" So of course, it didn't take long for Metroid to show up in this Q&A. That's how these Q&As usually tend to go, which is fine with me. And this is tricky because, I mean, I don't hate any Metroid game. I'm sure you guys know that. I ranked all the Metroid games like a year or two ago, and I was like, I love all these games, but there has to be one on the bottom of the list. And with 2D Metroid games, it's the same thing. So, you know, my least favorite, it's an obvious answer, but it's the original Metroid 2, The Return of Samus on the Game Boy. Because it's just really clunky, it's really old, the lack of navigation really hurts that game, more than it does even in the original game on the NES, in my opinion. Samus is this huge sprite that takes up so much of the very limited Game Boy screen. And it's also so important that you know how to navigate, because you're trying to find all the different 40 Metroids to destroy them before you go fight the Metroid Queen. And it's a cumbersome, awkward game to play. It is not bad. It's got one of the greatest Metroid tunes from all of the series. And it's certainly still good. Like, you're still Samus, you're still doing the Metroidvania, Metroid backtracking thing. It's fun. It's very cool, but it's very awkward. So when they came out with Samus Returns, it was a great way to bring that story back. I really loved what they did there. But again, you know, I like all these games. I like Metroid 2 on the Game Boy. It's a fantastic game. Next question comes from Larry V at HeroStorm96. And Larry asks me, should Metroid Prime 4 add more beam variety instead of the standard 4 beams? I'm thinking maybe like 5 to 8. That's a lot of beams. Also, what new weapons/gadgets should Samus get to add new form of gameplay? So what kind of new weapons and gadgets should Samus be able to get, which would add new forms of gameplay? Really good question, and probably the kind of stuff I could cover on a video at some point. But if I was to answer it here, it's tricky when you get to the beams thing, because all 3 of the Metroid Prime, you know, the console games, 1, 2, and 3, they all have a different approach to the beams. And the first one, you had her 4 beams, right? And you could just change between the 4 of them. In the second one, they gave you really only well, there's three beams. Your main power beam, and then you also get, like, you know, the light beam and the dark beam. So you technically have three in that game, but it's also based on ammo. It's the only Metroid game that uses true ammo, not counting missiles, of course. And then with Metroid Prime 3, that's where they actually brought in something similar to what, like, Super Metroid did, what Retro called weapon stacking, where you start off with just her beam, her regular beam, but then as you upgrade her beam, you're not getting different beams you can select from. You just keep stacking on, like, you go from one beam to another, to a plasma beam, to this and that. And it just changes your beam permanently for the rest of the game, but it'll also retain the prior features of that other beam. So, like, you know, in games like Samus Returns or Super Metroid, when you get, like, the wave beams and the ice beams and stuff like that, you still can, like, retain those abilities even though you're shooting a different beam when you've stacked on top of it. I don't know if that makes sense, but if you guys have played the games, you know what I mean. So all three Prime 3 games used a different beam situation. With Prime 4, they might do any one of those options, you know, just have 4 to 8 beams, have different beams that use ammo, or just use the weapon stacking, or they might come up with something entirely new. I don't know that I have a certain desire of how many beams she needs to be able to have. It just depends on... It's a cop-out answer, but as long as the gameplay and the puzzles and the enemies and bosses around Samus in the game make use of whatever beams you get, that's all I care about. Because the beams are also integral to the puzzle solving and the backtracking and opening up new areas and fighting certain kinds of enemies you couldn't hurt prior. That's like the brilliance of how they use her weaponry to their advantage in the Metroid games, both 2D and in the first-person Prime games. So they can do whatever they want in Prime 4, and I'm personally going to be okay with it. As far as new weapons and gadgets, you know, I've thought a little bit about this stuff. I've got some weird answers here. One of the things that I want, and I've long said this, is I want her to be able to fight more hand-to-hand, okay? She did it in Samus Returns. They brought in the melee counter. In Other M, they made her a total badass. She's punching and kicking and, you know, choke holding and suplexing. Like, she's going crazy in that game. She's like a ninja warrior, which I think is actually really cool. And I think that even in a first-person Prime 4, they could introduce some melee combat and make her a badass with her fists / you know, arm cannon, and it could be really cool. So I'd like them to do something where as enemies close in on you, if you're surrounded by enemies, Samus should be able to kick and punch and do things like that to get them away from her. She shouldn't have to be just reliant on her beam like this. You know, in my opinion, I think that'd be really cool. Here are some weird ones, okay? One thing I think would be cool is, you know, like a jetpack, the ability to, like, fly or hover or something could be really cool, you know? The way she kind of can, like, in the water in Metroid Prime 2 when she's underwater. Or, you know, you get, like, the double jump in all of those games. But if she could actually... And I'm not talking about the screw attack either, because that was a great addition. Something, you know, just like a jetpack. It's not like a revolutionary thing to put into a game, even a first-person game. Halo's done it before. But I think it could be really cool if she could get something like that. The other one, the most wild one I can think of, is something I don't have an answer for. But it would be a different form for her to change into beyond the Morph Ball. Think about it, okay? The Morph Ball has been the tried and true transformation Samus has had forever, since the first game. She's got this awesome Varia suit, power suit that she wears. It's her dope armor, and it has this incredible ability to turn her into a tiny little ball without killing her, and then let her come out of that too. And so, why haven't we seen in the decades of Metroid and all these different games, we've never seen her suit be able to turn into something different? And it might sound weird at first, but if you think about it, it makes sense. And I would like to see them... I don't know what it would be, you know? Like a little... Maybe like a little ship. She could fly around as her own little ship or something and shoot weapons. Or, you know... like, I think of like the chicken walker thing from Star Fox Zero. I don't want that to be what they do with it, but... Think about how, like, you know, we saw the R-Wing do something it could never do before. Previously, it was just the R-Wing. And suddenly it's like, oh, now it can transform into this little chicken walker thing, you know, which was part of Star Fox 2 originally. And so that was like a new thing they threw into that game. Didn't work the best, but it was there. And so what if they did the same thing, only way better for Samus. I think that would be a cool upgrade. Maybe they start playing with the things her suit can do beyond just getting like more powerful or allowing her to move in like in water, like freely, stuff like that. What if she could change into something else? Sounds kind of crazy, but I would like it. Okay, moving right along, we have Jeroen 7X at Jeroen 7X, or maybe 7 times. What's up? Thanks for the question. I don't know if I said your name right. Sorry about that. But they ask me my favorite bands. So I like this question. I love talking about music. You know, I'm a metal guy, so 90% of the music that I really enjoy and listen to is metal. I do like plenty of other genres, but I am mostly focused on metal. I perform in 2 metal bands currently right now. I've been playing metal music for like 20 years at this point. So that's my favorite genre. So my favorite band of all time is Metallica. They really kind of got me into music and got me into metal for sure. All-time favorite band, most influential band absolutely to me is Metallica. Some other ones that are huge for me, Pantera has always been one of my all-time favorites. Megadeth have been one of my all-time favorites. So as far as like older legendary bands, those 3 are really the top for me, Metallica, Megadeth, and Pantera. For current bands, probably my favorite would be Between the Buried and Me. Very, very progressive, experimental, wild out there stuff. It's so good. I've seen those guys in concert like probably close to 10 times. Blake Richardson, the drummer, is probably my favorite drummer in all of metal. One of the best drummers, I think, who's probably ever lived, especially for the genre of metal with what he does. Also a huge fan of Periphery. I really like Meshuggah. I really like Gojira. I really like Within the Ruins. I mean, I don't even know. So many different... Born of Osiris, Fear Factory, lots and lots of metal bands, man. Tons of stuff like this. I'm really into super progressive, super technical music, so that's definitely part of it too. But, you know, there are bands I like that are also not really metal. Main one that comes to mind is probably 311. They're probably my favorite non-metal band. I also like Set Your Goals, 4 Years Strong. I Fight Dragons, of course. They're really great. Weezer is a really great band. So these are the kinds of music that I like. I mean, honestly, if I really went through my Spotify, oh my God, forget it. I would just be naming so many metal bands, it would just be crazy. So it really comes down to kind of these few. Next question comes from Ian Boast at Woodland Waiter. And Ian asks me, would you like Nintendo to do a live-action commercial for the next Metroid game? And of course, I would love for them to do that. I think that... Oh my God, the live-action commercial for the original Metroid Prime, if you haven't seen it, look it up. Maybe I'll play it here. It's so cool, man. It just makes me just yearn for those days in gaming, man. It was so cool seeing how much time Nintendo put into making that commercial for, like, a Metroid game. Like, they haven't given that much love to Metroid in so long, and it was such a cool era when Nintendo was willing to do that. I also think the live-action commercial for Metroid Prime 2 was very cool. Didn't have as much to do with the story. It was just more about this badass chick walking and becoming Samus to just be like, here, and then also buy a GameCube. So that, you know, that was cool. It was definitely cool. Also, not to be undersold is the amazing live-action trailer for Metroid Other M. And I know all the haters are going to come out of the woodwork and just crap on the game. And that's fine. You can have fun doing that. But when you look at that commercial... It's so cool. And it speaks, it's great because the game is kind of about exploring who Samus is, and the commercial really drives that home. She's even looking at a child version of herself, you know, probably seeing her parents getting killed when she's a little girl. And, you know, reliving parts of her past, like with Adam Malkovich and the whole, you know, that, it's just freaking, I don't know. I like the game. I think the commercial's amazing, so I recommend you guys go check that out. Our next Twitter question comes from Diablo Shigami in the Coffin at Sergeant Crack. What is up, buddy? He asks me, legit question, how do you manage a full-time job, a band, and part-time YouTuber? And being a part-time YouTuber. Dude, I mean, man, that's a good question, you guys. I don't really know that I have an answer for that. It's something that my fiance jokes about a lot, like how I do so much in my life. And I don't want to turn this into like a humble brag thing, but I guess I have to answer the question, you know, because it was asked and I chose it, so I have to talk about it. But I mean, honestly, if I could just really answer the question, it's just that I'm somebody who's built to manage multiple things. I'm super passionate. I'm super driven. I'm really motivated. I'm not really somebody who likes just sitting around doing nothing, which is ironic because I play a lot of video games, and that requires you to sit around doing nothing. But I get distracted playing video games a lot too, and I play in chunks because sometimes I need to get up and I need to go to the gym when it's open, or exercise. I need to go play drums and practice. Obviously, I do work full-time career, working, more than 40 hours a week, 45, 50 hours a week, sometimes more. And yeah, I play in actually 2 bands, okay? And I do YouTube, and this, definitely takes up time. So I really do it because honestly, it's going to sound really crazy, but I'm not really like working at it. Okay, it's not that I'm not working, because I think I'm somebody who works hard. I do. I work hard. I put a lot of effort into my life and the things I do, but it's so natural for me to want to do so many things, and I want to play music. I want to play in a band. I've got a job, so I have to do that. I want to do YouTube. I want to make videos and do stuff like this. And so just because I want to do it, it feels less like work, and it's just something I end up doing. It's not a really clear answer, I guess. I just happen to be somebody who's built for it, and I manage my time in a crazy way. And, my fiance is very patient because I'm always busy and always doing something, and we don't, maybe spend as much time together sometimes as we'd like because I'm always doing something. So I'm very lucky she's patient. That's a huge part of it. Also, we don't have kids. I don't have any kids, so that frees up so much time. If you have kids, it's a whole different ballgame. When you don't have kids, the world is your oyster. Hence why I don't have kids and will never have kids. I have no desire to make human babies and deal with that. I am way more into my job, my music, doing YouTube, and then of course spending time with my fiance, soon to be my wife. That's where I like to put my time, and yeah, I guess really that's my answer. Jupiter Husky at Jupiter Husky asks me, if the rumors of 3D Mario remakes are true for the 35th anniversary of Mario, other than Breath of the Wild 2, what do you expect Nintendo to do for Zelda's 35th anniversary next year? Well, good question. I think, here's the thing. More than likely, I think Breath of the Wild 2 will come out next year, and that's probably the only thing they really need to do, even if it is the 35th anniversary. But if we just kind of go with it for a minute and let's just pretend that Nintendo will be doing more than just Breath of the Wild 2 next year, which we don't even know that, but I'm just pretending that is coming out next year too. I think that there's 2 things that kind of make sense to me. One of them would be, this is very exciting to me, one of them would be a new 4 Swords game. When's the last time you guys heard Zelda 4 Swords, right? It's been a minute. And I think that the GameCube 4 Swords game was so freaking cool. The first 4 Swords, if I remember right, the first one was on the Zelda A Link to the Past Game Boy Advance as like a side thing. I think it had both of those games, and that was the first one. And then they did a GameCube one later. Maybe it's reversed, but I think that was how they released. And I mean, the GameCube one was awesome, man. My roommates and friends and I, we played that a lot back in the day. Same with like Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, where you could use the Game Boys as your controllers for these games. It was so cool. And I think that, with online play being so much more prevalent now, I think that there could be a cool way for a 4 Swords, couch co-op or online co-op game to be made. So I'd love to see them bring that back. Not the Triforce Hero weird thing. That's not really it, Nintendo. But 4 Swords could be it. So I'd love to see them do that and bring that art style back. The other thing maybe I could see them do would be just like a Zelda collection disc of older games. I'm reminded of, what was it called? The Zelda Ultimate Collection, the GameCube game that had Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, I think Zelda 1 and Zelda 2 on it. Maybe A Link to the Past, but I think at least had those other games. And that was really exciting to get a GameCube disc that just had these old games. That wasn't so common back then. So maybe they do something like that, only for the Switch. And I think that would be pretty cool. Next question comes from Sushi at JM440147. And Sushi asks, what games have you been playing recently? If not, what shows have you been watching? I've been doing a little bit of both. Gaming-wise, the thing I'm most addicted to right now is Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, of course, the first new Nintendo game in a long time. I'm loving it, even though I already played the game on the Wii. I'm really enjoying the remaster. It's a ton of fun. I love the quality of life improvements. It's a great game. And I am not a JRPG fan, and I'm still willing to tell you it's a great game. I also was playing Neo 2 for a minute there. I didn't quite beat it, but I got really far into Neo 2. And then, what else have I been playing? I don't know, random things. My fiance and I played some DBZ Fighters the other day. I play some Battlefront 2 every once in a while. I think that's it. Nothing really too exciting. Just waiting for The Last of Us Part 2 at this point. Xenoblade until Last of Us is my current gaming thing. What shows have I been watching? Well, I've been going through The Walking Dead again. It's like my favorite show almost ever, especially with the second rewatch. I just started Season 7 the other day, so I'm a couple of episodes into Season 7. It's amazing. It's The Walking Dead. Great time to be watching it when there's been, this pandemic going on. It's got us all stuck inside. Also, we've been going through Dragon Ball Super. We are right near the end of Dragon Ball Super. Never seen it before. This is our first viewing. We have the last, 15 or 14 episodes to go. Very, very crazy where things are going, and can't wait to see how that ends. And I think that we're going to also start Clone Wars. I've seen Clone Wars. My fiance hasn't. She's seen a little bit of it, so I think we're going to go through Star Wars The Clone Wars. And, yeah, that's pretty much what we've been doing. Okay, moving on to the next question. This one comes from Eric at ShadowKing0017. And he asks me, do you feel Luke's characterization in The Last Jedi clashes with Return of the Jedi? If he was willing to forgive all Vader did and try to save him, why not Ben? So this is a huge question with so many implications, and man, I have a lot of feelings on this. I have very complicated feelings on this, and I want to try not to make this take too much longer, because I know that we're running pretty long as is here. But, when it comes to Luke and The Last Jedi and Return of the Jedi, it's such a hot topic for Star Wars fans. I think that what I would say, do I feel that the Last Jedi version of Luke clashes with the Return of the Jedi version of Luke, the original trilogy version of that character? I would say that it's not that I can say yes, I think he clashes, but I can say that I think people who don't like the Last Jedi version of Luke do have some merit to that opinion. Like, I see what they see when they see a contradiction between the two, but I don't necessarily see it 100% as a contradiction, even though there are parts of that I also do think is true. It's really complex, you guys. I mean, everyone hates The Last Jedi. I don't hate The Last Jedi. I like The Last Jedi. I have some major issues with the movie, absolutely. Some of them have to do with Luke. But overall, I do think it's a good movie, and I think that Rian Johnson got the closest to capturing the spirit of the George Lucas Star Wars that any of the other two movies by J.J. Abrams did. Like, by leaps and bounds, he got the closest. And when it comes to Luke, I think that what I see with that version of Luke is I'm willing to accept that it's the same character, but just 30 years later. And after 30 years, so many things can change. Your view, your outlook can change, your motivations, your desires, the things you're willing to do and not do. Those things can change even if you're the mighty, powerful Luke Skywalker, the Jedi that brought the Jedi concept back, I should say, after so long, and dealt with his father, who was Anakin, who became Darth Vader, the ultimate evil, but he managed to save and redeem him and bring him back. I mean, so much going on there. And then, people don't like the fact that Luke in The Last Jedi was not willing to be a part of the fight, didn't want to help the Resistance, didn't want to help his sister, which is a huge thing that doesn't feel correct, and then also was willing to kill his nephew, whereas he was otherwise willing to save Anakin, his father. And again, I see the contradiction. It maybe wasn't the best way to go with that character. But I'm willing to buy that after 30 years and everything that he did, after defeating the Empire, after destroying the Emperor and saving Darth Vader, and then he starts to rebuild a Jedi Order, and he's got his nephew, his sister Leia's son, and everything's great, but then he sees bad in him. Did the story show us that he jumped to too much of a conclusion? Yes, I do think that he jumped to too much of a conclusion. But does that mean he's not the same Luke Skywalker? I would say no, because I think what we really saw was just Luke Skywalker making a mistake. I don't think it was about, oh my god, they didn't understand Luke and they wrote him to be a totally different person who was willing to sacrifice his nephew instead of trying to save him the way he was willing to do with his father. I think it's more that after so much time, his life experiences are different. When he was fighting the Empire and just getting to know his father, it's different than 20 years later when he's rebuilding a new Jedi Order and he has these life experiences behind him and he's doing a different thing with a different member of his family. And so I think it really just came down to him making a mistake. And what the story told us, even though I do not like the Disney trilogy of movies, I will say what the story was trying to tell us, and I understand what they were trying to say here, is that he was dealing with the consequences of his mistake. Losing his Jedi Order, losing his students to become the Knights of Ren, as dumb as those ended up being, you know, losing his nephew and not feeling committed to his sister and to the fight anymore. That was him dealing with the consequences, and the story we see in The Last Jedi is him trying to come to terms with those and come back and do the right thing, which he ultimately does. The Rise of Skywalker threw that out the window, and we never got to see a further resolution between Luke and Ben Solo, and it was a huge mistake, one of many that movie made. But in general, I really just see it as, it's 30 years later, he made a mistake, it's the same guy, but he made a mistake, and he had to deal with those consequences. So, personally, that's what I see. Okay, back to some gaming stuff. This comes from Morlock5k Gamer, at Morlock5k, and they ask me, Metroid Other M Definitive Edition. It's not a question of should they, he says they should, but if they did, what could they do to make it less hated by the masses, which he says is not him. The game would be amazing in HD, and if they tweaked the silly motion search searches, that'd do it for me. So, this is a really cool question. I've talked about before how I think that Metroid Other M could be revived and remastered, and I think that the game deserves another shot because we all know most people don't like Other M, but a lot of you guys know I do like Other M. It's not amazing or perfect, it has flaws, but I still think it's a very good game. If they were to do a definitive edition and remaster, remake it, how could they improve upon it? Great question. You know, obviously improved visuals, we'd get that. I think that one of the big things is really the control, you guys. I know that one of the biggest things people hated was the fact that you use the D-pad on the Wii Remote as opposed to just an analog stick like on the Nunchuck. And I didn't mind it, but I do agree the game would control better with the analog stick. You know, to the game's credit, and I don't think a lot of people allowed themselves to see this, but to the game's credit, when you use the D-pad, that game, even though it's in 3D, and you can move diagonally and the camera moves around as she moves around, they've got her movement on like a grid-based system that they don't really show you, and so I think people get confused on how you're supposed to navigate. That camera will move and spin around Samus, but if you just hold left, right, or up or down on that D-pad, she's still gonna move in a straight line, and like the moving camera isn't gonna change the way she moves. It's almost kind of a little bit like old Resident Evil tank controls. A little bit. And I thought it was really cool, but the problem is they didn't do enough to show the gamer that that's how it worked, and so people instinctively wanted to, you know, go diagonal in all these different directions, and it really sucked to do that on the Wii's tiny little D-pad. So the analog stick would be a huge change. Here's the thing, the only other things they could do to change the game from what people didn't like would be to straight up change the story. Change the cutscenes, alter Samus's inner dialogue and her journey and her adventure, get rid of the Adam Malkovich, you know, permission thing for using her upgrades. Those were things that people really hated in that game. I kind of liked some of it I didn't, some of it I did. And it's so fundamental to the game that I don't think that they could change it. So, changing the motion control thing, like you say, changing the controls to using an analog stick, and updating the visuals, I think that would be one of the biggest things. And maybe some new content. It would be kind of cool if they went back and added some stuff. I would actually love to see that. All right, I believe we are down to the last two questions here for the Twitter version of the Q&A. This next one comes from Dylan Powers at Powers of Dylan. And Dylan asks me, are you a fan of the Alien franchise? And I am a huge fan of the Alien franchise. And the reason I chose this wasn't just to talk about movies, but I actually have a very personal story when it comes to the Alien franchise. In general, I will say, yes, I love the Alien movies. I think that Okay, most of the main movies are good. I don't like the Alien vs. Predator spin-offs because they screwed up the story. I actually read the original 3 novels that started the Alien vs. Predator, and they were so amazing. And the first movie tried to touch on that, but ultimately fell apart. The second one was complete garbage. As far as the main Alien movies, the only one I really don't like is Alien Resurrection. I think Alien and Aliens are classic, perfect masterpieces. Alien 3, I think, is underrated. It's not amazing, but it's very good. I like Alien 3. It feels very consistent with the first 2, and people really hate on that movie, and I wish that they didn't because I think it's actually a really good movie. Also, hot take, my fiance and I are huge fans of both Prometheus and Alien Covenant. I think those are also very underrated. Love his vision there. So, yeah, I would like to see what he's going to do next. What I do want to say about the Alien franchise, my personal attachment here is I actually lost one of my best friends a couple of years ago. Very hard to talk about. One of my best friends of all time, his name was Shakespeare. That was his real legal American name. He's Chinese, from China. His family is from China. And so his legal American name when they moved over here, I think he told me they moved over here when he was like a baby. And his legal name became Shakespeare. So it's not a nickname, that's his actual name, is Shakespeare. And he did pass away a couple of years ago. Very, very hard time, very difficult time for myself and my group of friends back home in Denver. Huge, huge deal. And, you know, his favorite movie of all time is Aliens, actually. And so what we've done since he passed away was we, every year on the anniversary of his passing, really the anniversary of the date that he went into the hospital. He passed a couple of days later. But the anniversary of that date, which is, in my opinion, considered the day that he did pass because he wasn't really able to be a person, you know, until his family chose to, you know, do what they need to do in that situation. Not to get too personal here, but on the anniversary of that date, we watch Aliens. It's what I call Shakespeare's Day, and, you know, my fiance and I are alone out here on the West Coast. Our friends who knew him are back in Denver. And so every year on November 1st, which is Shakespeare's Day, we watch Alien in celebration of him. And so I already loved the franchise. The movies are amazing. Some of them not so much. Some of them are incredible. And simply because of my very good friend, his favorite movie of all time was Aliens, it has an even more special place in my heart. You know, it's just a dumb movie franchise about aliens, obviously, but it's very special to me and my group of friends for that reason. So, love the franchise, and so, yeah. And the last question that we're working on today comes from Kane the KG Gray at the KG. And Kane asks me, do you think the next Nintendo console will be backwards compatible? Also, do you think your digital purchases will move across to the new system? This is a really great question, and unfortunately, it's harder to answer now than it would have been a few years ago. Before the Nintendo Switch came along, I probably would have said, yeah, it'll probably be backwards compatible, and, you know, maybe they'll figure out the digital purchase system, maybe not. But with the Switch, it's different. The whole nature of this question is different for a few reasons. One, because the Switch uses little game cards, little cartridges, right? Which is different than using a disc, like a CD or a Blu-ray, or even like a mini disc with the GameCube. So that makes it a little bit harder when you kind of try to envision what the next console would be. It also is weird because I think we all expected there to be like a virtual console and a more significant digital purchase, digital video game infrastructure for the Switch. And none of that turned out to be true, unfortunately. So when we think about it being backwards compatible, it's like, well, is the next console going to play game cartridges? And if it will it play the same size and shape and format of the Switch cartridges? And then the digital purchases thing, that's just a Nintendo business decision that, honestly, they haven't been the best with, right? They haven't really... When you looked at going from the Wii to the Wii U to the Switch, we'd all purchased a lot of games like, you know, Super Metroid and Mario 64 and, you know, Metroid Prime Trilogy or whatever. And tons of games for NES, Super NES, Nintendo 64, Sega Genesis, TurboGrafx 16, and like they didn't carry over. People had to actually repurchase these games. I think there was a discount they offered on the Wii U, but it still required a repurchasing of the games that we had owned on the Wii. And that was very frustrating for a lot of people. And then the Switch comes along and doesn't even give us a virtual console, which means all of those games that you purchased on the Wii or the Wii U don't even exist anymore. They are giving us the NES and Super NES games, you know, as a bonus for already paying for the online service, but that's not the same as having the library of games that you already owned and already paid money for. You know, that's something you have to continue to pay for just to have access to, and there's only like 20 to 40 games a piece for those, but there were hundreds of games on the virtual console for the Wii and the Wii U. So that's a lot of money and purchases people paid for that existed digitally on Nintendo's old infrastructure, but the Switch comes along and basically just threw all that away. So then we look at the next machine. Would Nintendo maybe change their business model here and allow for, you know, obviously this doesn't count for like NES and Super NES stuff, but for all these digital purchases we've purchased on the Switch for like current games, will they allow those to carry over to the next console? There's a chance that they don't, but I'm gonna guess that they will. I think that this will be a situation where maybe Nintendo does learn this lesson and they realize, yeah, you could make more money by making people repay for things, but that's not how the industry is doing it across the board, and it would be just be a bad PR, bad business decision, you know? I mean, on the PSN, Xbox Live, and on Steam, and probably Origin and the Epic Store, if you've purchased a game before, if you're playing now on a newer device, you can still download those games. I've downloaded games I purchased on the 360 onto my Xbox One. It's awesome. And I've had Steam on 3 different computers, and I can still download those games on all the different computers that I've had. You know, same for PlayStation. And so if Nintendo came along in the next couple of years with a new machine and didn't allow you to do the same thing, man, they would get raked over the coals, and justifiably so. So my prediction, even though I could be wrong, my prediction is that they will step up in this regard, and they will kind of fall in line with the rest of the industry and allow us to re-download the games we bought digitally on the Switch onto the new console. And again, the backwards compatible thing, I don't know. I mean, if the next console is just another Switch that plays game cartridges, then yes, there's a good chance. Just like going from DS to 3DS, right? There's a good chance that they allow you to do that. But maybe it won't be a Switch, maybe it won't use cartridges, or maybe it uses cartridges that are a different size than the Switch ones, which means the Switch ones won't fit into the new one. It's really hard to predict. I mean, everything about the Switch is a huge paradigm shift in these arenas, like the digital arena, the online arena, the backwards compatibility arena, as far as your physical games. Really tough to say, and it's hard to predict what Nintendo's going to do with their next console. They might make another traditional box that sits underneath your TV. It might not be another Switch or another handheld, you know? I mean, it probably will, but we don't know it, and so it's tough to say. So yeah, I don't know. At the end of the day, I guess that's what it is. And so that concludes the first part to the Q&A. These were the Twitter questions that I chose to answer. So many great questions from you guys. Thank you so much. Again, to everyone who asked a question that I did not answer, just keep an eye out and keep trying next time. You know, I can't answer every question in the world. Heck, that's why I'm even splitting this up to 2 parts for the first time pretty much ever. But I do appreciate the questions and the love. I hope you guys enjoyed the shout-outs, the answers that I gave. This was a ton of fun. Thank you guys for the questions. Please discuss all these answers to all these questions below. And keep an eye out for part 2 in the next couple of days. And with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of 2 Review, and I will catch you next time on another video.